invest in it and believe in it.
You had a point.
Well, I would say that the most difficult thing in terms of having spent some time up in Capitol Hill is that I mean, this administration clearly supports electrification of the cars, and things have been done. 1 million cars on the road by 2014, credits for battery factories in Tennessee and the like. But what I think the challenge is that the coalition's roadmap really calls for, in the first instance, through this foothold strategy, a preferential system in terms of some parts of the country will get access to something that other parts of the country won't. And in my experience dealing with the 535 members of Congress, all of whom, in terms of, wanting to do what's right by the national interest, but also their own constituencies, that's the challenge, is to persuade people that this things like tax credits that will only be available to people in certain of these, that's a real challenge. Now, is that unfair? The roadmap contemplates an International Olympic Committee like approach where cities will apply for it, or ecosystems will apply for it, and I think that that's really magical, because the key to this whole thing is to get everyone to move at the same time. And preferential parking, access to high occupancy vehicle lanes, things that will improve the driving experience for the person that owns the electric car. There's a lot that doesn't need to be done at the federal government level. And so you want the federal government, the state and local governments, the business community in a particular location, all to come together and then present a package that the consumers find more attractive than the status quo.
Did anyone else want to jump in on this point, please? And let's keep this focused on we know this works, we know it's real. Where do we start? What do we need to do to get started right now?
Well, just to add, in addition, I think, to the support that's coming out first on the Energy Security Act in 2007 for the vehicle manufacturing, and then the Money in the Recovery Act for both batteries and the smart grid, which will help to support this. I think as the president, his view of the stimulus package was that it had to stimulate the economy now and also lay the foundation for what our future will look like. And I think the next important piece of that is comprehensive energy and climate legislation, because that creates the long-term signal with respect to energy security, clean energy, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and I think that helps to create the future framework that will support the kinds of actions that are laid out here today.
Tim.
I think it's helpful to look at this from the perspective of the adoption of innovation, and there are patterns that we've discerned at AeroVironment where we create and try to launch innovative new technologies that seem to have been consistent for centuries, and they take a long time. I think the conventional wisdom is 20 to 30 years recently. It requires awareness broadly. It requires the reduction of perceived risk from the new innovation, and it requires that the innovation somehow fit in an acceptable way to existing patterns of use. And I think in those areas, much of that has been done and can be done and should be done by industry. A lot of it can be accelerated with a collaboration between industry and government in the ways that this coalition has proposed. And I think particularly this idea of getting a critical mass in multiple areas is an effective tool to accelerate.
How close are we, though? Let's just move on to this other key question which has been alluded to here. As we, go from smokestack to tailpipe, how close are we to having that smokestack, that initial baseload power source, being at scale from clean power? Peter, did you want to say that? Because if not, what's the good of electric cars powered by coal?
Well, if you think about the overall thing we're trying to do, right, with smart grid and energy efficiency, renewables, electrification of transport, through energy efficiency and smart grid, we're making that generation pie smaller. We're making the system leaner. And through renewable energy and increasing clean energy sources, we're making the green slice of the pie bigger. so making the system greener. We're trying to make it leaner and greener. When you look at substituting oil for electric power as we move to electrify the vehicle fleet, we've got lots of capacity already. We've got baseload capacity. By definition, it's clean. Oak Ridge National Labs had a study that said if everyone came home and plugged their electric car in at 5 p.m., if we had 30% plug-in hybrid or plug-in electric, full electric vehicles in the country, and everyone plugged them in at 5 p.m., we would need 160 new power plants to deal with the marginal load. But if through smart charging and aligning the interest of when these cars are charged with the profile we have, the generation profile we have today, we would need 0 to 8 new power plants. So the power is there. Echoing what Senator Dorgan said, I think we need standards. We need standards around plugs. We need standards around public charging infrastructure.
Who does that, Peter? Is that some of the government mandates, or is it the industry, as we've seen in the consumer electronics industry?
I personally think it's a good amount of both. NIST has a very productive effort underway, which is quite impressive. I think we need a much stronger FERC. We have a strong FERC. I think FERC needs to be stronger and stronger to do the kinds of things that the FCC did around standards in telecom. And we need to incentivize utilities to rate-base charging infrastructure. So we need to make sure these electric cars are smart, that the charging infrastructure is there, that we leverage the utility system to do it, and that we have really high and transparent standards.
Well, Carlos, listening to what John and Peter have said, how far am I away? I work on Farragut Square, park at 17th and it's when I first moved here, it was $11 a day. Now it's $17 a day. I have a vision that in about 5 years, my parking ramps in my neighborhood are actually going to bid for me to park there with my electric car, because I will be providing that regulation buffer for whatever the local power company is, and they will actually bid, maybe throw in Redskin tickets if I well, not Redskin tickets, but I mean, if I park there. How far are we from that kind of ecosystem?
Well, we are, between all car makers, we're the most bullish, and we are forecasting that in 2020, 10 years down the road, 10% of the car sales globally will be electric cars. Okay, zero-emission cars. But frankly, I think fuel cell cars are still far from being mass-marketed. We have the technology, but it's very expensive. So, because the key issue here is for us to make it a mass-marketable product is affordability. Because you have a lot of electric cars being today advertised at $100,000 or $50,000. I mean, it's not going to work. Right, yeah. That's not going to work. That's one of the reasons for which hybrids, by the way, represent 9 years after the launch, less than 2% of the global market, even though there is a lot of appetite for this, because they are very expensive and they are complicated. The electric car, by definition, as an engineer, I can tell you, it's much more simple. It's much more simple. That means you don't have complexity in the electric car from an engineering point of view. What you need is scale. The only problem is you need to get to a certain scale for you to be able to compete against the internal combustion engine. And for this scale, back to we put ourselves in the shoes of the consumer. The consumer wants to pay the same price, and it's possible. The U.S. government has decided $7,500 incentive to the consumer if you buy a zero-emission car. French government, €5,000, exactly the same amount, $7,500. Japanese government, 700,000 yen, exactly the same amount. The Israeli has reduced the sales tax from 80% to 10% for electric cars. So everybody got it, that the consumer has to find it as an economically reasonable solution. That's number one. Second, he doesn't want something that he doesn't understand. The plug-in, that means how you charge the car and how at home, and how do you charge it if you want to do more than 100 miles a day, should be something simple and reasonable. And we have solutions today. And they are not very expensive solutions. So when you answer these two concerns, incentive to consumer, so it's a reasonable economic decision, and he knows how to charge, he's not worried about if I need to do more than 100 miles a day, how do I do? Then I think we have the condition for mass marketing. But I think it's going to take more time. Again, I stick by the 10% in 2020, not faster than this, because I think the investments to be made are huge.
And
exactly. That means 50,000 battery a year